sealing, exclusion, and some other preventive techniques. Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back. Happy Pie Day to all of you. No, it's not P-I-E. It's just P-I, like pie, finding the circumference, and it's a cool day. You know, if you use, we use pie a lot actually in pest control. We use it to find out what is the DBH, the diameter at breast height of a tree. And what you do is you take a measuring tape and you measure the tree around, and whatever inches you get around that, you divide it by, it's approximately 3.14, and that's kind of close enough to pi, and you'll figure out what that diameter at breast height is on a tree. So it comes in very useful and very handy to have that info for tree service. Hey, welcome to the Pest Geek podcast. This is Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek. I'm having a blast here today recording this podcast. We got a couple of things to talk about regarding pest control. We're going to be answering some email questions from our listeners that they've been sending me emails about certain podcasts that we put out, and I decided, you know, I've got enough of those emails. Let me start answering them, because I answered them directly when they email me and for questions, but I thought if they have the question, other people will have the questions. So we're going to be putting those questions on the air today and discussing some past podcasts and some issues that maybe I wasn't clear about, some things. So we'll be doing that. But first of all, I want to be thankful to those who have liked us on the Pest Geek podcast on Twitter and Facebook. Give some shout outs to Greenhouse at By Greenhouse. It says, we specially supply plant support and plant growing caring products and more garden supplies, horticultural supplies, and agricultural supplies. Hey, so thank you for listening to us on the Pest Geek podcast. Big shout out to you guys. And also, I like to give a shout out to Mark Reardon. He's the owner at Critical Care Pest Management in Brisbane, Australia. He's down under. And big shout out to you over there listening to us on the Pest Geek podcast. We're making it around the globe, folks. We're officially international. We've been we're listened to in a lot of countries. I had an interesting conversation with one gentleman. We've been having some email conversations, and he's in, I believe, in Scotland and or Ireland. I now just lost my train of thought there. Which one of the two is he in? But he's in some type of land far away. And talking about the products that he's been using. He's tried some of my techniques for getting rid of ants, and they've worked for him. And no callbacks yet, he says. So I'm grateful and thankful for all of you sharing, listening, contacting us, and letting us know how we're doing that. I'm grateful and thankful that I'm actually being able to help some people in the industry. And that is the purpose of the podcast, to be able to do that and help people in the industry. Also, there's a great new app by the National Pest Management Association. It is the Field Guide, and it's available for iOS and also for Android. And you can go to I just downloaded it today. I was kind of looking at it. It's a pretty neat little field guide, not very extensive, but it does provide, I think you can use it as a great selling tool to show the customer what that pest is, and you know that you know what you're talking about, and back up the information that you're giving them. It is a buy app. It's $4.99 on the. I got it from the App Store for my iPad, and we're looking at different like crazy ants. It's got a very good library, more extensive library on ants than the iPest, which is 4 volumes. On the iPad, so it's great. I think it's a great investment for $5 to have that information at your fingertips when you go visit a customer and you talk to them, and even for great for new technicians in the field to be able to get some really good, very easy information at their tips that they don't have to go hunt for. So really cool guide. It's a great tech tip for the week. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I think it's it's worth the $5. Going forward, also in the news, we've got another marriage made in green heaven. True Green and Scott's Lawn Service have announced a merger. It's pretty much a done deal. So these two giants of the lawn care industry are marrying. I don't know if it's the weather, if it's the warm weather that's causing these marriages. I guess they wake up one morning and call each other and say, hey, I've been thinking about you, and I think we should get together and merge and consolidate our industry and, reduce the overlap and fire some people while we're at it because, we just have too many people working in this industry. So, yeah, that's what's happening. A lot of people are going to be displaced, I think, from this one. And, down here, I deal with one of them. I won't say who. But I get a lot of calls from their customers, and I really appreciate the business guys. So, this merger ought to free some people up to work for other people and some customers. It always does happen when there's a merger, that inevitably customers leave or employees leave and move on to something else. And it's part of what's going on in the industry. It's going to be, everybody is merging. DuPont is merging, and now True Green and Scott's Lawn Service are also merging. But getting on to the show, I wanted to read a couple of emails. It is from a listener of the show. That's how he wants to be identified. He doesn't want to give his name or the company he works for. He just says a listener of the show. That's how I would like to be introduced. So I am introducing him as the listener of the show. You're the official listener of the show. So it says here, he says, hi, Frank. Loved your podcast on dusting wall voids. Would you mind talking about issues that you've encountered when dusting wall voids and how you've overcome them, such as what happens when paint seals and electrical outlets and removing it will rip off the paint? And do you treat the plumbing area behind the toilets? And if so, do you drill or patch? And do customers ever have issues with this? Keep your podcast up. Would love one on hunting spiders. Yeah, me too. I would love to do one on hunting spiders. I've never hunted for spiders, so I think we need to do one on that. No, but all seriousness, folks. Yes, that's a very good question, because I gave in an original podcast on how dusting reduces your callbacks. I got actually a couple of emails on that one, and people are actually doing it. They're actually trying it out. It's working for them, and it's just a new, basically just trying to reduce overall pesticides and getting better control and providing better value for your customer. So what have I encountered in wall dusting? Not too many problems. Occasionally you do have to do most of the ones that I do, most of the voids that I treat are kitchens and bathrooms. So that's number one, on a routine basis. All the outlets in the kitchen, all the outlets in the bathrooms, and underneath all the pipes in the kitchen, underneath the sink, underneath the toilet, we do treat for those. Major problem that I've encountered with trying to treat back there, sometimes they do funky things with bathrooms, and you can't. These new modern cabinets that actually have drawers instead of opening doors, you have to pull the drawers out. That's the major challenge. So you've got to kind of, be careful when you're pulling those drawers out, so you're able to get back there and dust and seal. Because we not only do we dust, but we also, after we're done dusting, we foam it in. And I use the DAP Tex Plus foam, which is a white foam, which does great for walls because most of those walls are white. It doesn't expand. It's a great, wherever you put it, that's where it's going to stay. And if it does expand or does get out, I can just take even toilet paper and just wipe it down off the wall. It comes completely off. So it's really almost idiot proof. I mean, you can't really mess this up. It's not like with the other insulating foam. That thing expands. It's yellow. If it accidentally explodes the tip on you, you got to be doing some cleaning up with some chemicals. Not a good idea to do insulating foam indoors unless you got a big void that you need to fill. I did one in an apartment not too long ago where in the air conditioning unit, they had this huge hole in the wall that they had made because they had run some water piping through, and the guy didn't do the drywall repair after they'd done it. I said, look, it's going to be sloppy, but if you don't want to hire a guy to do the drywall because it's going to be, trying to do that wall repair, it's kind of like the valve was recessed into the drywall, and then they had this gap around it, and it was just ridiculous. And I said, I'll insulate it for you. You're going to have some, push out, but, it'll get it done so you don't get all these roaches. He's in an apartment building, and that's the biggest challenge. Apartment buildings, I get a lot of calls from condos down here, and that they have to do their own individual condo because the association or the management does not provide pest control for interior. They only provide an exterior, perimeter treatment to the buildings. That's all they do. Individual units, you have to do it yourself. It's in their contract. So we get a lot of those calling. On the paint, I always carry with me one of those utility knife. I carry like a Husky knife, and it's a utility knife with a very sharp blade for opening boxes and things like that. It's great because it has a nice tip and a sharp blade. And if I'm pulling that out of the wall and they've painted and then they immediately put it back and it kind of sticks to it, I can just cut around the inside edge. And when you remove it, the plate, you can put it right back over it, and it'll be like nothing ever happened. So especially the plastic ones. Now, obviously, I get once in a while, I'll get the guy who has painted that kitchen 15 times in 15 different colors, and every single time they never took the plates out. They just painted right over the plates. There's paint inside the grooves. There's paint inside where you stick the outlet. There's paint everywhere. On those, I let the customer know. I said, if you want me to do it right, I'll remove it. You're going to have this huge cut mark around all this paint. I just highly recommend that I remove it and that you replace the plate. And I'll put the plate back, but you're going to have this ugly cut. Do you want me to do it? Normally, I catch all that when I do the initial inspection. And a lot of these, we close this over the phone, so we don't get to see the actual condition based on what I interview the customer over the phone, and we know what they have. Then we give them what our pricing is. Our pricing is standard. Our service is standard. We have a standardization for all this, and the reasoning is we have to standardize. You can't hire people, you can't train people, and everybody does something different. So this is a standard service that we do because it does cut down, especially in apartment buildings, especially in multi-unit dwellings, on the amount of problems they're going to encounter in the future. So that is what I do with I do not drill. I especially behind walls where there's piping and there's sometimes electrical, I'm not going to drill unless I absolutely find a need. And with all those voids and all those holes, there's never been a need for us to be able to drill. You don't want to hit a pipe and then have a pipe burst on you and something like that. I know I've seen enough home remodeling, problems that I've seen in homes where I've been in the industry long enough to do in home remodeling and in just the home repair business to see all kinds of crazy things that people do and contractors do. So I'm not taking the chance. Normally these little, my duster, which I use the B&G bulb duster, that B&G bulb duster has little angled tips that I can bend and I can put behind there and I can still dust. I've never found a problem. We pull those plates away from the wall, usually those little cheap metal plates, and sometimes there's paint all over the piping. If you just turn it and twist it a little bit and pull it back, you got enough room to work and get your dust back there. And then the same thing with the ceiling. We have enough to where we can just, you don't sit there and you hold that trigger to fill this giant void. You just, tap the trigger a couple times on the sealer, and then you look behind from different angles. You can see, I always carry my little mirror with me anyway. I carry a little mirror which has a little flexible tip, which I can look behind anything and see if it's sealed. And then I just push the plate back into its location. And that's it. And sometimes I'll overfill it and let it overrun, and then I push it. And once I push that in, it creates a seal all around that plate and around everything, every gap. And then I just wipe it down because it's perfectly white. If they have tile, it wipes out perfectly. If they've got painted walls, it wipes down perfectly. Never an issue with things like that. So those are the in the electrical outlets and issues with paint peeling. Not an issue. I mean, I know that if I see a painted wall and that plate doesn't immediately come off, then I know I simply just go around. I'll lift very carefully because sometimes they'll use, they don't use flat latex paint. Flat latex paint is going to come right off. But some of them use the semi-gloss, and the semi-gloss tends to get sticky to the plastic and to the wall, and you can start getting some peeling. And you see it, well, you just cut it, around it very carefully. Now, this isn't a job for... It all comes down to training. It all comes down to training. If you've conditioned your technicians and you've basically all you've done is spray, and you sprayed in, you sprayed out, and that's all that technician's ever done, and now you have to train him to stop and smell the roses. And that's very hard, especially when it's easy when you have one technician. When you have 10 technicians, when you have 12, when you have 20, when you have 100, yeah, it's going to be tough because they're used to being in this rush mode. We got to get to the next stop. We got to get the next thing done. We got to get the next house done. With us, I have an attitude of stop and smell the roses. You don't want to be in a customer's house rushing around and a customer seeing you that you're rushing, because they're going to perceive that you either missed something, you didn't do something, you got so much on your plate, you're not giving them quality time. You want to be able to let the customer see you doing your job as a professional, that you're cool, you're calm, and you're collected. You don't have to be in this rush mode when you're in the house. And if a technician is used to that, you're going to end up with two types of technicians: the one who's a butcher and the one who's a surgeon. And you got to decide whether your people can handle that, and retraining is very tough. That's one of the challenges that people have in this industry when they've been strictly trained to do just spraying, and now you have to get them to stop and do delicate work around delicate properties. So that's been the challenge that I foresee, and this is the reason we train from the get-go. The right way to do it with protocols, procedures. This is what you do every single time with this particular pest. The only time I change the protocol is if I decide that we're not going to use the Cymexa dust, but we're going to use a roach bait dust and we do have a lot of problems with German roaches and a lot of multi-unit dwellings, a lot of condos that have German roach problems, and then we'll switch it up with a Avert dust, and we'll switch it up with that to do the outlets and everything else, because that's going to be the major problem that they're experiencing. We can also later come in through the outlets and do the Delta dust too. I'm sorry, not the Delta dust, the Cymexa dust. And we can do that. I don't use Delta dust for German roaches. I don't like doing that. Another question that he asked was in another interaction that we had. It says, he promised me he would call the show, but he hasn't. But that's okay. I will continue to read his emails. I can call in with my question, but I'd rather be known as the listener of the show, LOL. We are mostly concerned with what the customer thinks if they see razor marks around the outlets, as an example, or patch marks in their walls. When you say you do the plumbing, are you talking about all the voids that contain a water pipe? If there's no easy way to access the void, do you skip it? I'll call in tomorrow for you. We have questions based on non-repellent podcast 2. We feel like our entire product line needs to be non-repellent. Now for general pest maintenance. Good stuff. Thank you. Basically, good stuff and apostrophe. The issue of the plumbing, Patch marks. No, we don't drill. Like I said, there's no patches. You're able to use it this way and then seal it. And we don't drill, and there's no issues with the marks on the of the cutting. Like I said, only if obviously you're going to have those cut marks when you have multiple layers of paint, and now you're getting cut through this, and you're never going to get a straight line putting that much pressure on a knife trying to get through. You got to be careful the knife doesn't slip. You cut down the wall. When you're cutting drywall and things like that, that's always happened when we got to cut out drywall for some type of big, we got to make a hole in the wall to see what's behind there for some other reason. The customer says, I got a beehive, and can we make an incision and take a look before we see how big this is? And we can always put something in the wall camera or something to take a peek. But on the issue of the non-repellent, I did a podcast on non-repellents. No, you don't have to switch your entire line to non-repellents because, as I said in my previous podcast, non-repellents belong to the same class. So if all you use is non-repellents, then you're going to run into an issue where you're going to have a non-repellent neonicotinoid resistance, and that's not a good idea. It's about my philosophy in pest control is true integrated pest management. Integrate multiple tools. The way I look at integrated pest management, it's an art and a science. The reason because it's a science, because the principles will always work. If an insect has a habit of being in the crack and crevices and you perform a crack and crevice spray, you're going to get control of that insect. It does take longer to reduce from using an entire gallon in a house to using a couple of ounces of chemical and crack and crevice treat everything. That takes longer. And that's the issue with training, is that if you've got people who come from these big companies sometimes and all they're doing, or little companies and all they're doing is spray, 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 and you have to retrain them now to think and train them as a true pro, and you've got to put them through a training process. And the training process is double the work because you got to untrain the bad habit and train the good habit. And that's the problem with a lot of people, that the technician just gets tired, frustrated, because he can't solve it, and he just instantly goes back to the heck with it. I'll just take my can and solve it with my can. And that's the way it is. So very important that the training has to be continuous. The reinforcement of the philosophy. You got to have a philosophy in your business. If it's just control the pest at any cost, whatever you have to do, if that's the extent of training that a lot of people do with their technicians, then that's very hard for a technician to measure where his lines are. And I think that if you have established protocols and procedures that you continuously train on, monitor, inspect, follow up on the work. If you're out there in the field, when we tell the customer, and here's another thing, and this is one of the things that, another question that comes up about salespeople and should I hire salespeople. My philosophy on hiring salespeople is that I put the salesperson through the same training that I put the technician through. I want them both speaking the same language. I want the salesperson not to overpromise on something we can't do because he doesn't know what a pest problem is. And then the technician gets there and says, we can't solve this problem this way. And I don't know why he sold this. And this is a pain and we don't want to do it. And all those kind of issues that you have between sales force and the actual technician doing the work. So my philosophy is you train the technician and the salespeople together. The salespeople should be going on service calls. The salespeople should be learning what it actually takes to get that job done. The 40-hour training, a basic 40-hour training should include all that they have to understand. When you sell the protocol, so when the technician goes in, he says, oh, but the salesperson told me you were going to do this, that. And if he messes it up, you know that he's shortcutting, he's taking shortcuts, and the technician is not going through the protocols and procedures. And, when I tell the customer, this is what we're going to do, when we show up, we do exactly what we said we were going to do. And I tell the customer, listen, we have to do this, this, and this is why we're going to do it. because most people are concerned about the amount of products going into their home. That's the reason they called us, is because of that promise that we have, that we promise to reduce the amount of pesticides in the home. So a good thing, another thing about people are concerned with is about how much do you seal? How much do you seal? How much work do you do? And that's going to depend on what your protocols and procedures are. You've got to have protocols and procedures set up to say, this is our limit. This is all the spaghetti you can eat. I know the sign says all the spaghetti you can eat for $9.99. At one point, you got to cut it off. After about the 12th bowl of spaghetti, you're going to have to cut it off. So it's a matter of you go to a house, the salesman is there, the technician is there, whoever is selling that job, and say, look, we're going to seal, but we're not going to do a complete caulking contract on your house. You're going to need to hire a paint contractor, or you're going to need to hire a handyman to do that much sealing. If you look around every single door and every single window, and the cracks go from one end of the window to the other end of the window, that's a repair job. That's not a exclusion job. My exclusion job is limited to about 3 feet of total caulk around that property. Rarely will I use 3 feet around the properties. There's a big difference if you're servicing a $100,000 home or a $200,000 home that's in disrepair, and you're showing up to a $1 million mansion where they keep everything tidy and neat. They overlook certain things, and your job is to help them with what they overlooked and correct those deficiencies. In other words, I see an ant coming out of the water spigot. Well, I'm going to take my caulk gun and I'm going to caulk around that water spigot. Now, I use the Alex Plus all-purpose clear caulk. The reason is it goes on white and it dries clear. So it doesn't matter what paint the person has. I'm going to be able to seal that, and nobody's ever going to know that I sealed it. And it's still going to look like the crack is there, but it's sealed. I go around, the electrical box, and somebody made a hole in the wall where they had an incision where there used to be another box there, and they left the screws, and it goes all the way through the block. Well, I'm going to put a little dap in there, and I'm going to seal that hole. Big challenges down here in South Florida with holes is that there's a lot of homes with shutters, the hurricane shutters, and a lot of people will put the screws back on and leave them there, and I see ants always coming in and out of there. At that point, you got to do a crack and crevice job and treat those holes, because you could get carpenter ants to start going into the home through there, and that's a big challenge. So, some people will put the screws in, and then they had the house painted, and they've never put their shutters up in 3 years, and all of a sudden, all those screws are now glued to the wall because they painted over them. But things like that, little holes here and there, cracks. Biggest challenge I have with exclusion is in commercial properties where all the rear doors don't have any of the door sweeps on them, and that's a big challenge. Sometimes I can stick my whole hand underneath these doors and don't have door sweeps. And we're going to start, because we've run into so much commercial work now that we're doing, that we're getting into, and we're finding that is one of the biggest challenges. And then I tell the people, hey, listen, you need to put a door sweep. Yeah, I'm going to get my guy to buy it tomorrow and put it. I'll come back next month. It still hasn't been put on. Come back the following month. It's still. Listen, you're going to get American roaches to go through there like Grand Central Station. Okay, you need to cut that off. So what we're going to do now is just make it part of our exclusion service, because usually they only have one door maximum in small retail places, or 2 doors, and these things are $10.99. Tack it on to the price of the initial service and say, by tomorrow I'm gonna have them. You can have 10 of these in your truck. They come in standard sizes of 36 inches, and it takes 5 minutes to install. You close the door, put it over the door, take a drill that first hole, stick the first screw in, go to the other side, make the second drill hole so it lines perfectly to the floor, stick in the other screw, and then do the center screws, and you're done. It's a 5-minute deal. And it's a great way. It's a great add-on service to make more money for exclusion. Those are the things that we're finding, that as we get into other things, that, hey, these are challenges. And if we don't help the customer get it done, sometimes it just won't get done. And so those little things, now all of a sudden there's a big giant hole. We get calls on rats because there's so many palm trees up against the house, and the rats go up on the roof. And what we find is with these contractors, when they built these houses, they have multiple layers on the roof. They don't have just one pitch in the front of the house. We have the tile roofs where they're not shingles, they're not metal roofs, they're tile roofs, and they're these the Mexican tile roofs. And what you do is when you start looking at the corners, you will find these holes underneath these gables and these ends, and those are where the rats are getting into the attic. So what do? We tell the customer we need to seal that. It's part of your initial service for the rats. It's going to cost you $85. It's going to cost you $100. And what do we use? We use Excluder. The reason I use Excluder and I don't use foam is rats will eat through foam, but they won't eat through the Excluder. A lot of times people use the stainless steel. That stuff's expensive. This is much more practical. A roll costs you like $11, $12. You keep a roll of that in your truck. You get it. You pull out a couple of inches of that thing. It comes in 1-inch strips. You can get 3. We do pretty large holes. And you stuff it in there. I got a screwdriver that I bent the tip on and get an idea so I can get it underneath angles. And we just stuff it in there. It takes 5 minutes to do those holes. The biggest challenge you have is you got to get up on that roof with a ladder. And we seal it. And we do the exclusion for those rodents. After we trap them, after we've made sure that they're not in the attic anymore, and we've done the trapping, then we'll do the exclusion. We'll cut the palms away, the fronds. We can carry in our truck a pole saw, because that's a big issue. We carry a small hand pole saw, and we just simply trim those branches away and tell the customer, look, we're going to have to leave it here. We don't do gardening, but if we don't do this, you got the ants going up to the second story window. And we just got rid of the problem. We just got rid of the ant problem. So how much work are you going to have to do? That's going to depend on you as a company. That's going to depend on what you're feeling you're going to give a value and what you're providing other than just chemical. And making that move one step at a time to where you see a pipe outside and the hole you can stick your thumb through, use the excluder. Just stuff it in there. Foam, I don't like doing the exterior foam that expands, because then it's going to expand on you. Then you got to wait until it expands completely. Then you got to come back. Then you got to cut it out. And what happens is the customer's going to say, oh, that looks horrible, looks ugly. Never mind that the rats are getting in through everywhere, that this house needs painting, that, the windows are shot. They're looking at that one little work you did for them to help them out, and they criticize your work. So my position is I'll stuff it, and I say, listen, we did an exchange. You had this hole. We stuffed it with a product. You need to hire a mason to come in and put cement around that and fill that hole. That's not something we do. We just did you the courtesy of sealing it, because if not, mice and rat are going to get through there, and we had to stop. And then you make that as part of your presentation. I think everyone should have a presentation folder, or if you carry a tablet, that you use it to make a presentation to the customer so they can visualize. We walk the customer around the entire property and make them see the problem. Okay? And that's part of our sales process is, look, we're here, we're going to do their service, but I think you need to look at this, this, and this. If you just write it on a piece of paper and you inform the customer of it, chances are he won't see the severity of it. So it's part of taking the customer by the hand, showing the customer, listen, these are deficiencies. These are things we have to fix. Do you want us to fix them, or are you going to fix them? And if the customer doesn't fix them, then you write it into your contract that if these things aren't fixed, we're not responsible for pests getting in again. And you will be an additional charge to remove that rat from the inside because they were negligent in leaving that door open. Those are things that you have to learn to deal with. You have to manage them. It's in our contract. It's automatically in our language. We make the suggestions. Certain times we're going to say to the customer, listen, we're just going to fix it. I mean, if it's just an inch of excluder, a little bit of caulk, we're just going to do it. I mean, it's, we got a contract with a customer, and we say, well, look, and we take a picture of it and we send it to the customer. Listen, we found this hole. This is what we did. This is how we sealed it. And I think you need to get a professional handyman or somebody in here that can actually fix all this and, move on. But I think that it's vital that in this new age that we're living in pest control, where we're seeing the writing on the wall that this is where facilities IPM, this is where real integrated pest management comes in. It's about integrating multiple tools. But again, I hate to harp on this. If you're focusing on being the cheapest guy on the block, then you're never going to be able to sell these kind of services. The people who buy these kinds of services want the service, want the attention, want their house to be pest free, and they don't want the chemicals, and they're being more sensitive about that. And, I think it's important. I think it's important that you start moving in that direction, that you start moving. If you go into a hospital, you will never find a guy with a B&G can in that hospital spraying anything down inside. It's not going to happen. You go into certain high sensitive facilities, you're never going to see that. You go into a school, you're not going to see that. So these people that provide these kinds of services are providing high-level services to high-level clients, to very sensitive environments. And I think that's where, we've taken everything from the hospital industry, the medical field, and we've taken it and we've integrated the same thing that they would do in those kind of facilities. And we've brought it to the home market. We brought it to the average person who have never in their life have heard of IPM or integrated pest management. I've only had one customer that actually found us because they saw we did IPM and they were looking for IPM. They did their research before they were looking for us. Most people are looking for natural pest control and organic pest control. And they don't know what they're asking for at that point. They just know they don't want chemicals. And so creating a standardization, creating standardized pricing, creating standardized presentations that you advise your customer of what you're doing and how you're doing it, I think will go a very, very long way in you acquiring more quality customers. And especially with all these mergers going on where people aren't liking the company they switched to. They're going to be looking for somebody else that does what their old guy used to do. And hopefully their old guy was better than what they are now. So, guys, hey, look, it's been a blast. It's been real. It's been fun. I'm having a ton of fun right now. We are just getting hammered with calls, customers calling us. I don't know if it was the rain in December, that we had 10 inches of rain in December, and we had a ton of rain in January, and now we're starting to see the results of that, where people are calling, but the phones are ringing off the hook. We're extremely ecstatic right now about this, and our closing ratios are really, really, really good. So I'm really happy. Guys, have fun. Enjoy yourselves. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in every week. And thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. Have a great one. Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.